consultation process was excellent. The opportunity that citizens had to input into the process was wonderful. And similarly, the Copyright New Technologies Amendment Act, the digital amendments to the Copyright Act of 2008 that allowed for format shifting and matters of that nature. So the legislative process actually has an awful lot to recommend it, because people can get in touch. And of course, we've got the proposed new media laws coming up on the horizon that the Law Commission is currently looking into. But the real fear, I think, that we've got to deal with, the real fear that we've got to confront, is the fear of change and the unknown that accompanies it. And I pick up from what Vikram said just a few minutes ago. It is a real worry because we don't like change. But when we think about trying to regulate technology or slow it down or pass a law that requires a man to walk in front of the vehicle with the flag, we have to remember that technologies don't just bring change to the world that we live in, they actually change us as well. Our behaviours change, particularly as far as IT is concerned. Our expectations of information change. You don't have to go down to the library to get a book to look something up anymore. The information comes to you. We approach and process information in a different way. And as a result of this, our attitudes begin to change. And finally, and we don't realise this, our values and our understandings begin to change as well. And that's just on the psychological level. On the physiological level, there are also changes. Now, the way that I'm communicating with you now is the only natural way that human beings communicate, orally. Writing, reading, it's all learned. It's not in our DA. Talking is, but everything else has to be learned. So when you learn to read and when you learn to write, there are changes that are taking place up here. Neurological changes. You didn't know that. You actually don't feel it. But once it's happened, it remains there forever. And the thing is that every generation has to relearn it. So every time you come in touch with a new technology, even driving a car or operating a computer or something of that, learning to type, you're undergoing physical changes, neurological changes as well. And this gives some validity to Marshall McLuhan's comment that he made in 1964, that we shape our tools, we make the tools, and then, whether we like it or not, our tools shape us. But technology also drives change by other means. McLuhan also said, and this is one of his more opaque statements, the medium is the message. And what he was saying was that we focus on the content of what we read or what we see or what we hear or what we see on the internet. We focus on the content, but the medium by which it is delivered is as important, because the medium itself is going to affect society. And every new technology has certain characteristics or qualities that define it or differentiate it from what went on before, and define and differentiate the ways in which we communicate. The first information technology was the printing press. And the printing press had a number of qualities, not just the fact that it was mechanised printing, but the qualities I can give you some examples. The quality of dissemination of information, the quality of standardisation of information, the quality of fixity of information that differentiated it from the manuscript culture that went before it. And every new communications technology that has come along since has built upon those characteristics and added a few others. So when you look at digital technologies, you've got things like persistence of information, the document that never dies. Once it's out there, and you can't stop it, you can't bring it back, even if you're going to take the website down. Information is also dynamic. It can change. And we've got continuing disruptive change, a matter that Vikram was talking about, but it is ongoing. And rather like going over Niagara Falls in a barrel, it's just going to continue and continue and continue. We can't stop it. And this is as a result of the wonderful quality of permissionless innovation that the internet allows. The backbone's there, you can build anything you like and put it on. And if you build it, they will come. And they do, and they have. Another problem that you've got, though, is dissociative or disinhibitive enablement. By that I mean that you can do all sorts of terrible things to people without actually having to look them in the eye. In my view, the internet fraudster is a lot more dangerous than the person who comes into the shop and tries to pass a check, because at least the person in the shop trying to pass a check has got to eyeball the victim. The person on the internet is completely dissociated from their crime, dissociated from their victim, no empathy whatsoever. And of course you've got remote access to information, you've got searchability, you've got retrievability, you've got participation in information, you've got the sharing of information, all wonderful characteristics of these new technologies, and those are just a few of them. And they enable digital natives. Those technologies enable digital natives. But they scare the hell out of other people because we don't understand, or we don't speak the same language, or we don't quite get it. And one of the examples of this can be seen in social networking. If you could roll it. Baba yetu yetu liye mbinguni, yetu yetu amina. Baba yetu yetu liye jina lako litukuzwe. Baba yetu yetu liye mbinguni, yetu yetu amina. Baba yetu yetu liye jina lako litukuzwe. Utuhele chakula chetu, tunatuhitaji utusamehe makosa yetu. So you look at that and you think to yourself, in the face of this change, what's the problem with the law? And I'm going to address that. And this is a question that needs to be answered before we actually get into the rights and wrongs of regulation and whether or not we should regulate. You see, the thing about the law is that it is static, it is conservative, it is hard to change, it operates on concepts of precedent, which are ways of looking at things through a rear-view mirror, and we look to the past for new solutions. Now, I recognize all of these problems. I love the law. Don't get me wrong. I've been in it. It's been my life, and I've done very well out of it. But there are problems that it has, and you've got to recognize it. And one of the other problems is that the law is underpinned by the values that exist at the time that the court case is decided or the law is passed. And the thing is that those values will remain as long as the law remains. And part of it has to do with this rear view problem that we have. And McLuhan made a comment about rear view thinking or rear view mirror. It's a mode of thinking where we actually don't see what's coming down the track until it's already there, until it has already hit us. The change has happened, and by the time we recognise it's happened, it is too late. And instead of looking ahead, a lot of the time, and Vikram made this point, a lot of the time we've got to cling to the past, and we do that. And we're always a little bit behind the 8 ball as far as what's coming down the track is concerned. And we don't recognise the technology and what it's doing that is responsible for the shift. But like all human beings, we like to know what's going to happen next. And this is part and parcel of the problem with fear of change. See, the lovely thing about the law, every lawyer will tell you, yes, well, we've got to have consistency, certainty, and predictability. Because on that way, you can organise your affairs. You don't have that. You don't know whether or not the contract that you're entering into is enforceable. But the law at least prescribes certain rules that allow for that. But as I've said, the problem is that the values that are relevant at the particular time that the law is passed or the case is decided stay as long as the law stays in place or until it is changed. In that respect, a law that goes on for 25, 30 years can become a rear-view mirror if the values that underpin it have changed since then. And here's the thing. You see, digital natives don't look at it in the same way that digital immigrants do. They see that the law is out of date, it's inapplicable, it doesn't work. Now let's take a couple of examples. Let's have a look at privacy. Marie's going to probably burn me at the stake for this, but hey, yeah. It actually started, first case about privacy was in 1867. Alexander Dumas, the author of The Three Musketeers, had some photographs taken with his mistress. The photographer, enterprising fellow, saw that there was a business opportunity here and wanted to sell them. Dumas didn't want him to do so, and he brought an action in copyright. The court said, no, we're not going to allow the action in copyright, but we are going to allow the action to succeed because you're entitled to a right of privacy. In 1867. Every privacy lawyer will refer you to an article in 1890 in the Harvard Law Review by Warren and Brandeis entitled The Right to Privacy. That's the basis pretty much of the philosophy that underpins privacy law. And in that article, there was comment about gossip and the trade that had taken place in gossip that was pursued with industry as well as effrontery. So you had a situation where celebrities and lawyers and paparazzi and the gossip media were all there in 1890, right at the beginning of the right to privacy, and they're all players that still occupy the terrain today. But the important thing that you got to remember is that the article was written for a different paradigm than we're in now. It was written for the print paradigm, and the values and the basis and the concerns and so on and so forth have to be seen as evolving within that particular context. Now, after World War II and the reaction against totalitarian states and state surveillance and so on and so forth, and 1984, there was a reaction to this type of activity. And it gave rise to a new approach to privacy law. The cartoon refers to the fact that they're reading 1984 in Miss Smith's English class, which has a certain irony to it. But today, you see, the problem is with all the social media is that we are conceding privacy rights. And not only social media. But social media is one thing, because the reason that we concede our privacy rights is because we want to be part of the group. We want to be accepted. And only by being accepted, by being accepted, we got to share our photographs. We got to share that we went down to the pub last night. We got to share that we went to a wild party. Oh, and by the way, here's the picture. And by that way, we get accepted.